Investigations of accidents and disasters from many walks of life have found a small number of stereotypical patterns that repeatedly precede essay-related adverse events. These are important triggers for essay checks. A familiar clue to the wrong diagnosis is that the patient does not respond as expected to treatment. If a landmark does not appear while we're driving, we're probably on the wrong road. At home, you call supper time but no one answers. Are they out? Uncertainty is common with junior staff or staff on issues outside their specialist fields. The habit of doing an essay check if there is uncertainty is clearly a good one, but there is a more important message. If someone is in a senior position with others looking up to them for clarification, they should get into the habit of doing an essay check whenever they detect uncertainty in others. This habit alone would have prevented countless disasters, such as removing the wrong kidney. Two conflicting sources of information cannot both be right. Two clocks telling different times can't both be right. Check against a third. The classic aviation example of this is an apparent conflict between the altimeter and ground proximity warning alarm just before a plane crash. Fixation is hard to spot in yourself and easier to see in others. Is someone concentrating and not responding to questions? Hearing is the first sense to go when fixating. If someone else thinks you are fixating, they are probably right. Repeatedly seeking confirmation of one interpretation of the situation rather than looking for other interpretations is a sign of faulty situation awareness. Leading questions are indicative of this. The blood pressure is stable, isn't it? Is leading, but is the blood pressure stable is not. These are a well-researched behavioural phenomenon seen in animals and humans. They are behaviour patterns that seem out of context with the situation, or at odds with behaviour occurring immediately before or after them. They occur when people are in situations they cannot control or cope with. Typical displacement activities are scratching of the head, humming a tune, doodling on paper, or fiddling with small objects. If a team member appears to be deviating from standard practice, it may be because they're not aware of what standard practice is in the situation, or because either they or you have read the situation wrongly. In many operations, it's normal practice to have a specified number of units of blood cross-matched. Where this is not done, a simple question such as, "Don't we usually cross-match 4 units for this operation?" can clarify. Both fixation and confirmation bias stop people from critically interpreting warning signs and incline them to dismiss them as aberrations or as irrelevant. Blood pressure monitors do sometimes underread, but equally they can be ignored because of fixation on something else, or dismissed because of confirmation bias. Deteriorating communication is a classic sign of overload or confusion. Signs include silence, difficulty speaking clearly, leaving sentences unfinished or questions hanging, asking for a "what's it?" or rambling off the point and asking leading questions. The change of staff or shift involves briefing from outgoing to incoming personnel. This is a potential source of essay failure for 2 reasons. First, the outgoing staff may have faulty essay. Second, the communication process during briefing is prone to errors and omissions. People have limited memory capacity and fluctuating levels of attention. Issues of motivation may also be significant, particularly where individuals are not being actively involved. In the scenario outlined in the silver advertisement, the captain of the USS Montana missed this trigger.
So sometimes we all get that vague feeling of unease when we just know something isn't right. And you know what? If you feel something isn't right, it quite probably isn't right. And that would be a really good time to just say, can we just stop and check, please? Better to be safe than sorry.
So far, we have described things that have been observed from an external viewpoint in team members before incidents occurred involving the loss of SA. The next point is something that is familiar to us all, but cannot be directly observed, namely the vague feeling of unease. This is an important SA check trigger, but to understand it, we need to understand its unconscious origin. Psychology experiments have clearly demonstrated that unconscious cognitive processing does occur and is rational. The aspect relevant to the vague feeling of unease is unconscious learning. Two memorable, though not very well controlled experiments are interesting.
In one study during the 1960s, students in a psychology class in America were asked to compliment any girl on the college campus who was wearing something coloured red. Within 1 week, the college was a blaze of red. When girls wearing red were questioned, they could not state the reason why they were wearing red. In another study, a psychology class received a lecture on unconscious learning and conspired to try some of it out on the lecturer at a later date. They paid close attention to him and laughed at his jokes, only when he was standing on the right-hand side of the lecture theatre. They almost trained him right out of the door. When questioned later, he was completely unconscious of this.
Both cases are graphic illustrations of a large body of psychological research that shows how we learn unconsciously and how that learning influences our actions. The conscious manifestations of this process are vague feelings. In particular, unconscious recognition of patterns containing conflict or threat lead to feelings of unease. This means that if someone feels uneasy about a situation, it's likely to be a rational reaction to something being wrong. The message is simple. Make the habit of keeping a low threshold for SA checks in response to any of these triggers.